The formation in which some members of city council are proposing is an antiquated, outdated, neoliberal, quite frankly, and austere approach that has created the type of consternation that exists today. Check this out. There are a number of city council members who signed their name to the same community safety surcharge back in 2017 for a higher amount and less employees. So here's what I suggested. How about instead of 50 employees, we go to 100? How about instead of $33, we go to 21? Does that count as compromise? Think about Chicago from 1973 to 2014. Can you look outside these windows and see evidence of job killing and people being whacked? In fact, if you look at our economy, it grew substantially under this particular revenue stream. Here's what I can also tell you. When it went away, there's no empirical evidence that somehow it made us more competitive. In fact, when it went away, guess what came in its place? 3 consecutive years of property tax increases, fines, and fees. Over $500 million. There's more evidence that with this revenue stream going away, that working people had to do more. I'm just saying, if anybody's gotten whacked, it's been working people in this city. We have seen a decline in population as a result of these failures. We have had austere budgets that have driven people out. We saw it right here in Chicago. School closings, the shuttering of mental health clinics, the dismantling of public housing, protection of the interests of privatizers. And where has that gotten us? It's gotten us into this economic despair that I'm working to pull us out of. The fact that 80% of property taxes go towards pensions, I can tell you that is more evidence that the way it has been done in the past has proven to be a failure.
Boy. So once again, we got to talk about woke Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, who is facing a lot of controversy due to the fact that he is hell-bent on raising taxes on businesses, on the rich in Chicago in order to fund his progressive utopia. Now, the problem with his head tax is that everybody knows that it is a really, really, really bad idea. And you know this because when you are a Democrat and the media, the liberal media, is hostile towards your idea, you know that is really bad.
All right. So if the head tax is such a great idea, where is it working now? Because there are, what cities, who you turn to, where are you looking at and saying, wow, wish we were doing what they're doing? Because I can't find one.
Well, look, if you're asking me if I believe that there is a model that's better than the city of Chicago right now, I'm going to tell you there isn't. We are setting the trend.
Which is why Brandon Johnson broke down in tears and doing one of these press conferences over his desire to raise taxes, okay? Because apparently this guy doesn't know how to balance a budget unless he can raise taxes on businesses, which ends up running them out of the city, which means that the people who are living in the city, aka the middle class, the lower income folks, the people who own property, they have to end up footing the bill, right? Because their property taxes have been raised, and they're now revolting against the administration due to the fact that they're having to foot the bill for tax the rich, right? That is what's happening in Chicago, but Brandon Johnson refuses to acknowledge reality. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this.
Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson shedding some crocodile tears today after his beloved corporate head tax proposal got nixed from the city council's alternative budget proposal.
There are lines of Chicagoans right now of people who do not have food, you guys. And if you've never gone hungry, you wouldn't know why I have that urgency. If you've never opened up your refrigerator and there's nothing in it, poverty sucks.
Yo, I'm trying. Listen, here's the thing, right? I don't mean no harm. Right? I'm asking this a serious question. Is that really a thing, right? Is that really a thing in the United States of America? I mean, seriously, is it really a thing that people are living in abject poverty to the point where they open up their fridge and they don't have anything? Like, there's nothing. It's a completely empty fridge. Like, is that really a thing? Okay, I'm just saying, with food stamps, with all the government benefits, I'm just saying, I just don't know if that's actually real, okay? I mean, I'm not saying there aren't people who are out here struggling. I mean, that's certainly the case, okay? There probably are people who have a hard time finding their next meal. I don't know, but I'm just saying, statistically speaking, the poor in the United States of America, they're obese, right? For the most part, right? Obese and overweight, which means that access to calories is not the problem, right? If you are one of these people, again, considering all of the government welfare, food stamps, all of the government assistance out there to help people feed themselves, and the fact that, again, a lot of poor people tend to be overweight, obese. I think that if you're struggling to eat, it's probably because you're spending the money on other things like, I don't know, drugs or stuff that you probably shouldn't be spending money on, and not food, right? So, I'm not saying that people aren't struggling or that, this is not, completely real. I just have a hard time believing this idea that, there are people who legitimately have no food in the refrigerator at all, right? It's like, I don't know, man. I feel like if you get a job, you can solve that problem. And that's the irony of all this, is that Brandon Johnson is proposing policies that are going to make it harder for people to feed themselves, right? Because if you drop all the jobs, the businesses out of the city, then yeah, people certainly aren't going to be able to feed themselves if you do that. But he's too stupid, right, to understand that. Incredible.
Corporations are making a killing right now, and we have alders that are more interested in defending these big corporations than families like mine who went without food and electricity and could not afford rent and mortgage.
What is this?
Get me something I can work with.
Maybe acting's in his future? I don't know. Well, this head tax he's got so emotional about is his genius idea to fill a massive 2026 budget hole, which would charge companies with more than 100 employees $21 per employee per month. Now, it's part of his larger $600 million proposed tax increases for the year.
For more, let's bring in Chicago Alderman Raymond Lopez. So Raymond, I know how much you love the city of Chicago, and none of us, not at this table or where you are, want to see anybody go hungry. Is this an issue of not being compassionate, or is this an issue of not balancing a budget?
This is an issue, guys, of how do you perform the best in order to sell the worst policy possible that's going to shift the burden of taxation away from downtown as you continue to chase businesses out and put it on the property owners, the homeowners of the city of Chicago, who are already seeing a 16% increase in their property taxes thanks to his policies that have chased businesses out of this city. What the mayor doesn't tell people while he's tearing up for the cameras is that just last year he tried to stick homeowners with a $300 million property tax increase.
He did.
As well as hundreds of millions of dollars in new fines and fees. He's doing it again this year, but in order for him to make that campaign pledge that he wants to tax the rich, this is the performance we get. It has nothing to do with helping everyday Chicagoans, because he had none of these tiers when he was giving away $600 million to take care of 60,000 Venezuelan migrants here in the city of Chicago.
Also, just for the folks at home, you've got a D next to your name. So you're a Democrat, you're in the same party as the mayor here. Raymond, so Seattle tried and then repealed a similar head tax in 2018 because guess what? Companies like Amazon threatened to withhold expansion. Why does he think Chicago would be any different?
You know, it's very interesting for me personally to hear Mayor Johnson talk about all of these failed policies as though they are somehow going to magically work simply because we have Lake Michigan right behind us. They are not going to work. We know what we need to do if we want to lessen the tax burden on working families is that we need to grow the economy. We need to invite businesses back. We need to put people to work. And his $21 a person head tax, while it sounds low, will cost company millions. Take, for example, our local grocer, Jewel, hires 35,000 people here in the city of Chicago. They would have to pay $7 million a year just for the purposes of putting people to work. I doubt they would stay just because of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's anti-business, right? It doesn't make sense. It's going to drive businesses out of the city, and they're going to get less revenue overall, even though they increase revenue by taxing the rich, right? No. What actually happens is that the rich leave, businesses leave. It's almost as if the Laffer curve is real, right? It's a real thing, okay? The more that you tax, that doesn't guarantee that you're going to get more revenue because the tax base leaves when you start increasing taxes. And that's especially true at the local and state level because it's a lot easier to leave a city or a state than it is to leave a country, okay? And that's what's happening to Chicago. These businesses are leaving and taxpayers, middle class, they're being stuck with the bill, right? They're holding the bag, okay, because of Brandon Johnson's tax the rich policies. Tax the rich actually just means tax the middle class because that's what effectively ends up happening. That's what happened. So with that being said, one of the reasons why woke Mayor Brandon Johnson is boohoo whining and crying about this is because if they can't agree to a budget, a balanced budget, over the next couple weeks, then the city could shut down, right? You could be facing a city shutdown if they do not agree. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this.
Well, the mercury isn't the only thing registering as chilly this December. Relations between Mayor Brandon Johnson and 26 members of City Council are frigid as the two sides remain deadlocked on a key feature of Johnson's 2026 budget. Political reporter Chris Ty is here with the latest on a proposed tax that Johnson says is fair and alders say is a job killer.
And the thing we're talking about, Erica, is the much ballyhooed employee head tax, initially pitched as $21 per month per employee on businesses with more than 100 employees. But late today, we've learned the mayor is floating an alternative version to that that taxes fewer companies, those with 500 employees. The tax, though, would jump to $33 per month per employee. It is the hot potato in a frigid budget season over at City Hall.
He has resorted to finger pointing.
Their proposal was $300 million short.
He's resorted to insults.
Doubling garbage fees, coming up with scenarios that have not had any real vetting.
And attacks on those of us who have dared to call out the dangerous flaws in his irresponsible budget.
It's just, that's incomplete.
We've done the work. The person who hasn't done the work and hasn't shown their work is the mayor.
These are some of the 26 alders drawing a line in the sand over the mayor's marquee budget proposal.
We can't afford a head tax in any form. This is a hard stop.
The head tax, which the mayor says will not cost jobs, was the focal point of a weekend budget session between alders and the mayor's budget team.
The only person that was absent was the mayor. If we're going to make a deal, he needs to be at the table.
I'm not the first mayor to send their budget director and their CFO into a room to have a conversation.
And he doesn't want to be the first mayor to see a city shut down over a budget impasse.
No one wants it, but it's something that I'm working overtime to ensure that it doesn't happen.
Some view the city's top executive using government shutdown talk as a political instrument as a Trump-like tactic.
100%. And what you're seeing is both extremes that are in charge of their respective governments at the same time. The far left and the far MAGA.
All right, now hold on now, buddy. Right, hold on now. You can't compare Brandon Johnson to President Trump when it comes to a shutdown. Trump didn't shut down the government, clown. Okay? Democrats shut down the government. Brandon Johnson is using the same tactic that Democrats used in Congress. Okay? Let's get it straight. I want to be sympathetic towards these aldermen that are pushing back against woke Mayor Brandon Johnson, but don't come out here with this Trump derangement, this nonsense, lying about who caused the government shutdown at the federal level. That was a Democrat tactic. That was not President Trump doing that. That was Democrats doing that, okay? That was a far left tactic. That's what happened. So, again, what you have here is woke Mayor Brandon Johnson being rejected, his head tax getting rejected, and he says, well, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to tax bigger companies, right? We're going to tax companies with 500 employees, and then we're going to raise the tax, right? So, again, this guy is hell-bent on doing this. The sad part about it is that they actually brought in a audit firm in order to help them balance the budget, and they found about $1 billion in cuts that they can make that would actually help. And Brandon Johnson just refuses to implement those things. He refuses to do it. He does not want to stop spending, and he wants to raise taxes on the so-called rich for his pet projects that don't do anything. And that's the problem with these progressives. They want to spend money on stuff that doesn't result in any real production. And that's the problem. That's the biggest issue here. This guy's a lunatic. But then again, the whole city is full of lunatics. Let's be real.
And there's my way or the highway, and that's just not how it works.
In a letter to alders, Johnson refers to the council wars.
Day after day.
When Alderman Burke and Verdoliak attempted to override Mayor Harold Washington's veto, a period of racially charged political infighting at City Hall, which some alders were outraged by.
It's insulting that this mayor would say things like that. We and many more of us, the majority of the city council, have been working for weeks trying to find alternative options.
So back to the head tax for a second. The mayor points out the city had a head tax until 2014. Its presence, he says, didn't hurt jobs. But alders say that is not true. They cite Bureau of Labor Statistics data that a job boom did occur for several years after the head tax went away in 2014. Erica, there's a full city council meeting on Wednesday. We don't expect any kind of budget green light that quickly, but they do need to get this budget passed by the end of the year.
Time is ticking, and you're right. These keywords, government shutdown at the city level, a lot of residents are probably wondering what in the world is going on.
It all of a sudden puts a sort of benign, boring government story on the front burner.
Right. Thank you, Chris.
You bet.
Hilarious. Hilarious. Another example of liberal governance, right, and what it leads to. Or put it this way, progressive governance. That's what I really mean. Progressive, okay? This guy, he just wants to destroy the city. He doesn't want jobs. And then he boo-hoo-wants and grow. The poor need to eat. They don't have any food in the refrigerator. And it's like, well, yeah, the best way to feed the poor is to give them a job, right? Give them a job. But if you're running all of the jobs out of the city, then yeah, they're not going to be able to feed themselves. The government's not going to be able to feed them. Let's be real. But that's what Brandon Johnson believes. He believes that the government can do the job. The government can feed everybody, can house everybody, can do everything. The government's like magic. And that's just not the case. That's just not the case. So we're going to see what happens here. If they can't agree soon, then they could be facing a shutdown. And Brandon Johnson's probably woke enough after seeing what Democrats did at the federal level to push the city into a shutdown over increasing taxes, right? He's like, hey, we want to shut down the government to increase taxes, to drive businesses out of the city. Amazing. Absolutely amazing stuff. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.